Hello and welcome to this very exciting episode of the Silmarillion Film Project, where we'll spend the whole time talking with Marie about COVID. No, not really.
Yeah,
Much more exciting than that.
much more exciting than that.
We're going to talk
Yeah.
to Marie about Baron and Luthien, and also Corey Olsen's here too. Uh,
Hey, yeah, yeah. Oh, and Dave, I
and
think you missed it last week. We were talking about. Did you know that Billy Boyd was watching? I was on the Friendship Onion.
what?
Yeah, I went on the Friendship Onion with Dominic Monaghan and Billy Boyd, their podcast, and
Uh-huh.
they were talking. Billy Boyd has totally listened to Film and loved it. He was a
That's
huge fan.
amazing.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
great. Is he here tonight?
No, I don't think he's here. I mean, who knows? Maybe he's tuning
Man,
in live. I invited him to guest on the show, so we'll see.
yes.
But that would be fun.
Do it, Billy Boyd.
Do it,
We're
Billy
waiting for
Boyd.
it.
Exactly. We would love to. We would love to have that conversation. Um, anyway, good evening, everybody. Welcome back. So, So tonight's a big night, right? Tonight's a big night because we're going to get to Baron and Luthien at last. It's the Baron and Luthien season, and we've been talking about everything other than Baron and Luthien, and now having eliminated almost everything else, not quite, but almost. I seem to be in a serious state of procrastination to talk about Thingol for some reason. I don't know what that is, but in any case, almost everything apart from Baron and Luthien. But tonight, we are going to start in, and our high goal for the evening is to agree upon the shape of the early part of the season, to try to figure out, what we want to have in general, like, very big picture outline. What do we want to see happen in episode 1, 2, 3, and maybe 4? Because then our script writing team can move forward while we carry on talking about Thingol and Dairon and Baron and Luthien and figuring out the rest of the stuff that we want to see in the season. But first, whole bunch of announcements tonight. We've got Myth Moot 9 registration is coming up. We've got these 3 moots. We have active registration open for 3 moots. We've got Myth Moot, of course, the end of June in Virginia. And the proposal deadline is coming up March 25th. If you want to propose a session, a talk, or a discussion, or something else at Myth Moot, you can submit those through March 25th. We have 2 regional moots coming up very soon. Tex Moot is happening on March 26th, and Sunshine Moot in Florida near Orlando on April 2nd. I'm excited. I'm going to be traveling to both of those, so I'm looking forward to. It's been since November that I've done any moot travel, so I'm excited to get back to moots here in the next few weeks here. Also, on the subject of moots, I am hosting a session, an information session on how to host a regional moot. A lot of people have been have said they're kind of interested to get involved. Whenever I talk about moots, always people are like, "Oh, you guys should come, out to where I am, and do a moot." And people have expressed some, interest in, volunteering to help make a moot happen near you. But a lot of people just don't know what that's about. So we're doing an info session on March 15th. It's next week, March 15th, from 1 to 3 p.m. We're just going to be talking about hosting a regional moot, what's involved. I'll be joined by Karita Alexander, our regional moot director, coordinator. She's going to be helping me talk about, what goes on kind of under the hood in planning. And I'll give you spoilers for that session. It's totally not as hard as most people think it is. So we have a lot of support for that. And of course, we have my Other Minds and Hands broadcast, the new broadcast that I'm doing on Wednesday afternoons, talking about adaptations in general, Tolkien adaptations in specific, and of course, talking about some stuff about the Amazon show coming up as well. I'm going to be doing my first sort of full discussion of the trailer, actually, finally. I'm really looking forward to doing a kind of a thematic discussion. It's so funny, with these trailers. People are so quick to, now, and you guys are going to laugh at me for saying, like, people just spend all this time picking it apart frame by frame. Like, I know, like, totally guilty. But the point is, though, what I haven't heard anybody do is, like, actually just sort of look at, like, the theme, like, the story. Like, we actually learned a lot about what kind of story they're telling, at least we learned some things that I never would have guessed without that trailer. And so I hear lots of, I hear, well, of course, a bunch of people complaining about it, but I hear a bunch of people, wanting to go through and be like, okay, who's that actor? And therefore, what is this probably happening here? And what does that tell us? But like actually, thinking about themes and ideas and stories, I think that we saw some really cool things. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on when I'm talking about the trailer next week. So anyway, that's a little sneak peek of what's coming on next Wednesday on Other Minds and Hands, which will be episode 3. So anyway, that is what is going on. We got a lot of things going on. Plus, of course, there's our space program and our fun new space modules coming up. Definitely look into all that. All right, let us get back into, once again, looking at the map. Okay, Luthien. So we're starting with Luthien because we've talked kind of around, at least for the opening stuff, we've talked about Beren a little bit more in the context of having discussed to some extent what's going on in Dorthonion. We especially talked about that from the Sauron perspective, but that actually already gives us a pretty good framework of what we have to deal with as far as Barahir and Beren and the band of outlaws up there and what's going to be happening. But we need to think about Luthien. I think this is a great place to start. Luthien's own character. So, and Marie has put together, and I am so grateful that you did this, Marie, a review of what, because we've had Luthien. We've Luthien's been a character. We've never spent a whole lot of time with her, but we've had Luthien on screen since season 3. So what have we seen with Beren? What have we done with Beren? Or Luthien. Sorry, what have we done with Luthien? She recognizes the importance of art in preserving culture during times of war. That's one of the things that we've said. She's good friends with Galadriel. That was one of the major things that we did, was to establish a friendship between her and Galadriel, which I think could pay off in some interesting ways. And she stood in for her mother at Galadriel's wedding, so that was a really big deal, especially under the context of the role that Galadriel's mother played in season 4, right? It was the death of her mom, and in the context of the kinslaying, that was just one of the central things that we had Galadriel kind of wrestling with over the course of that season. So therefore, the kind of symbolism of her new friend Luthien standing in her mother's place at the wedding is I think a really important thing. She used song to contest Sauron's power. We had the first song battle in Silmarillion, which was between Luthien and Sauron and his evil hurdy-gurdy at the Merith Atherthad. She valued Dairon's invention of runes, right? So we had her highlighting that, and she has shown interest in the Noldor and men. Now, remind me of that, because I know we spent very little time in Doriath in season 5, right? So it was it was in that episode, right, when wasn't it when Haleth and their people come in and they're wanting to get into cross through Doriath and they're getting stonewalled, and we had some discussion then, right?
Right. So we had Galadriel be interested in what what would become the House of Hadar, what those people were up to, especially as pertained to their border with Osirians. And so Galadriel does go to Doriath and kind of discuss the situation with men, with Thingol, and he pretty much says no. No interest in having these people around in Doriath. And then that is put to the test when Haleth's people want to cross through Doriath, and Thingol tells them to wait for his decision while he considers it. And being an elf, he takes a couple of years to think about it.
Right.
And they get bored and
go through the
Nang-Dangortha without waiting for his answer.
Instead, yes.
Yeah. Exactly. So we had multiple conversations about like who are men and what should their relationship with Doriath be. Thingol's stance is pretty clear. So Luthien was kind of like not opposing that, but wondering if there was maybe more to the
Right.
picture, and that if there was more to learn from that. So she was more curious than like fighting with her father over it.
Right. Right. But there was we were kind of laying the planting the seeds of what was obvious, to people who know the story, an obvious foreshadowing of what was to come, right, and the division between them. But we've established a kind of precedent of, if not even anything quite so strong as a difference of opinion, a divergence in sentiment from the beginning, right, and interest essentially from the beginning, to kind of lay the way for that. Okay, and of course we know Beren is... now, Beren was there at the rescue of Finrod, right? With Barahir at that time as well. And then since then, he and Barahir returned to Dorthonion after rescuing Finrod. Finrod returns to Nargothrond. They return to Dorthonion, even though they know everybody else has gone away, right? What do we have... This is the one thing I want to ask at the start, and I try not to get too bogged down in this, and because again, I want to spend a little bit more time on Luthien than on Beren first. But what do we have them trying to accomplish exactly? Why did they return to? They know. So it was really important during the Dagor Bragollach. We had this very important moment where they were staying as a rear guard. Right, they were enabling the escape of the women and children, the rest of the people of the House of Beren. They were enabling them to escape. By the time, and then they were waiting, right, hoping that rescue would come, that help would come, and then of course the help came, and then it needed help, right, as it turned out, in a fun twist, and they end up rescuing Finrod instead of being rescued by him. But after that, they choose to go back. Right, they choose to go back to Doriath, knowing that don't they know that they've achieved their end and that the women and children have escaped?
So the refugees have escaped, yes. So like the group that was packed up and fleeing the area, they accomplished their goal there. But not every human being who lived in Dorthonion left. Okay. So they know there's still people in Dorthonion. And that's what they're going back for. Okay.
So it's like a kind of guerrilla warfare against those who are now in control. Like there's no question of like we're going to retake Dorthonion. There's only a handful of them. But if we can, seek, find, rescue, help, deliver any people who are there, as long as there's anyone left in Dorthonion who might need rescuing, we'll stay and try to rescue them. That's basically the idea.
Right. Okay. And Gorlam in particular is going back because he never found out if his wife made it into the group of refugees, and no one ever saw her. Right.
So, and Gorlam is a really nice example, right? I mean, he's a good stand-in for. Not everybody knows what happened, right? So like the fact that there is uncertainty, there may still be some people here, some people may still need our help, including some people that we, not everybody that we know and care about was right there, with the refugees, and we don't know that they all escaped, and so let's be sure. And so Gorlam's concern is a good, obviously it's important for its own reasons, but it's a good...
It's an example of this bigger picture of confusion and not having answers and not knowing for sure.
Yeah, he's kind of like the poster child of why we keep fighting in Dorthonion and why we stick in Dorthonion, because we just... There might still be good that we can do, even if it's not like super likely, right? Gorlam's in a place where he has to kind of know that it's super unlikely that his wife has made it, right? But he doesn't know, and so he's not going to give up until, one way or another. Like, essentially, he's not going to give up until he dies, right? And that, I guess one of the things that I'm trying to get a little bit clearer in my head, just as a framework, right? Just as a starting place for Barahir and Beren at the beginning, because I think it's important for Beren's character, if like where he goes and what happens to him. to what extent are they like set on death? You know what I mean? Like, is it just like, we know there's very limited good that we can do up here, right? But like, doggone it, we're going to keep fighting until we're all dead, and that's pretty much what we're determined to, no matter what, you know, maybe we can achieve a little, maybe we can achieve a lot, but what really matters is, like, we're not going to take it, and we're going to keep fighting until we're all dead. And like, are they resolved on death in that way, or is, because if they're not, they could be, if they have a goal, like if they have a goal that they think is attainable, it changes the whole quality of what they're doing. If you see what I mean, like, there's a totally different tone to, like, because then they could be like, okay, if we can just, you know, execute operation whatever it is, then we can get out of here, right? And that's a very different attitude from, we're all leaving Darthonian feet first, right? If we're gonna leave it in an orc's cooking pot or not at all. Like, that's you know, that's what's happening here. Totally different attitudes, right? Because again, I'm thinking ahead really to Baron's choice to leave, right? What's at stake for Baron when everyone else is, when it's just him, right? And he makes the, you know, what choice does he make, right? Where is his head, you know, at that time? So I don't know. What do you guys think about how kind of desperate Barahir and his band are, or how determined they are, how goal oriented they are, or are they just like, we're going to cause the most trouble as we can until we're finally killed? I think the problem I have with that latter, the reason I'm not a huge fan of that, is that it seems to me to involve a significant amount of delusion unless we make something for them really to accomplish, right?
You mean
because
when you say that, you mean the second option where they're just out to cause mayhem?
Exactly. If they're just like, we're not going to leave Darthonian, we don't care. We're just gonna oppose them. However, like, it just kind of seems to me like, okay, dude, like, on the one hand, you could say to them in that situation, guys, listen, you want to do some good against the enemy that sacked Darthonian? Why don't you leave, join up with the other folks? Like, the handful of you staying in the hills, you know, slaughtering the occasional orc band. Like, what are you doing? What are you accomplishing? Like, like, they could tell themselves, like, we're fighting the good fight, and we're, you know, as long as we're here, Darthonian hasn't fallen. But they're delusional if that's the case, right? I mean, they're not really able to do anything.
They must have some specific goal that requires them to be there, or, as you say, like, or it has to, their state of mind must be off, which is, I mean, it's possible. It could be maybe they've totally despaired. They don't think there's any point in going on, or they're just stubbornly refusing to leave their homes, and they'd rather go out fighting and die in their home, taking as
in
many
which case we could
as
have
they can.
one or two of them saying, guys, we're not really doing anything here, right?
Yeah,
I mean, like, there could be some kind of division, you know, not division, but a sentiment among them that, you know.
We did portray Bregalas and the other old men who stayed behind,
right,
as the rear guard when the dragon was coming.
Yeah.
In that sense, like, those guys all knew they were dead.
Right.
And they definitely decided, let's die in our homeland.
Right. Right.
And they made a final stand.
And like, they were accomplishing something in that they were, you know, helping to cover the retreat and everything. I mean, but see, this is like, it's the, okay, now that, like, everything is pretty much over, let's go back just so that we can, you know, I don't know what we can do, right? Now, I mean, of course, I would be fine with them having, like, maybe Barahir is just kind of hardened, and I mean, because he's got to be in a tough place, right, after all of this has gone down and he's seen everything collapse around him. Especially, you know, we think about Barahir and his, I mean, you know, we had, like, young Barahir, you know, from the early days, right, in season 5. Wasn't he the one that we had who was, you know, yay high when they were first traveling up there, right? Wasn't that?
Right. He would have been 4 or 5 years old
Right.
when they made that journey.
So his position in relationship to this culture, that, you know, the civilization up there in Ladros, you know, he's grown up there, has grown into the leader there. He's invested. He's responsible, even like in a very different way. Like you think about Andreth and what her relationship with this would be, right? His is different. Like he will barely remember anything else, right? Like his whole life has been focused on, like, he's been trained for this, right? You know, he will have known, like, from his youth, the stories of, like, and now, like, the House of Baor is, like, moving up to fulfill its destiny, and you, young Barahir, will, like, help to lead, you know, your people into fulfilling their role. And then what happens? Like, he grows up and he takes on that position, and then they get stumped like ants, right? And everything is gone, and you know, everything has been lost. I could understand Barahir. He accomplished something in rescuing Finrod, but you could forgive Barahir if he didn't feel like very much came of that, right? He might not even really feel like he did that much. Like, what does that mean to him exactly, right? Okay, you know, Finrod gave me this cool ring, and that's nice and everything, right? But like, it's not bringing Ladros back. I mean,
I agree, it doesn't bring Ladros back, certainly. So as far as, yeah, they didn't win the war,
right?
But I don't think that Barahir devalued his own contribution. Like, I think he was pretty proud of himself for being able to help Finrod and rescue him in that situation. Like, I mean, the people of Ladros recognize Finrod as king because they were from Nargothrond. Like, they were pretty much Finrod's subjects. They tried to break away and be free people, but you know, it's only been a generation. So
right, exactly.
So I think that the connection there is pretty strong, and
it is. No, I don't mean to devalue it exactly. I'm just I'm trying to
figure out what the goal is now.
What the goal is now, like where Barahir's head is now. You know, like what?
Because presumably it's been a few years since the war ended.
And what's happening, right? What can he do? Like, what's the plan? What happens next, right? Because they can't be doing that much. I guess one of the things that the simplest way to approach this, and I'm not saying we take this route, but the simplest way to approach this would to have there be a kind of divide between Beren and Barahir, right? To have Beren be the voice of, you know, let's go. Like, there's no more good we can do here, right? Yeah, we're okay. Like, we're not letting the orcs have their own way in everything, and we're creating some problems for them in minor, you know, big picture, strategically speaking, minor ways. But, you know, seriously, let's leave. And Barahir's, you know, stubborn.
There's a generational gap there, right? I mean, obviously Barahir's his father. His cousins, Baragund and Belegund, are fathers themselves, so their children left with the refugees. So Beren is the young guy in the group, and would possibly have a different viewpoint than everyone else. I don't know that we want to make it that he wants to give up the mission and go home, and everyone else is like, but we are home and this is our mission.
Right. It wouldn't be to give up the mission. It would be like, let's get, like, this isn't a mission. Like, this isn't a mission. This is just living in denial, right? Let's go find Finrod. Let's go find Fingon. Let's go do something, go somewhere where we can actually help to strike a real blow against Morgoth and against Sauron, rather than just, you know, doing our occasional raid on orc camps or you know, ambushing, you know, traveling, like, whatever. Like, okay, so, like, we've killed a whole bunch of orcs since we've been here, right? That's kind of a win, but it's a small win, right? We're not really doing anything. but again, as I say, to me, that's sort of the simplest solution. And then, of course, it works. Then everybody dies. And then Beren is like, well, I guess I leave. Right. But of course, now his leaving would be a little bit more complex because now he'd feel guilty about like, now I'm leaving and now I should stay. Like my dad wanted to stay and now he's dead and they're all dead and I'm the only one left. And so now I should stay because that's what they wanted to do. And if I leave, I'm abandoning them posthumously. Right. I mean, like you can see the whole kind of complex thing that he could go through potentially. But I still don't know. I guess it still seems to me a little bit simplistic to have him wanting to leave from the beginning. You know, I don't know. I could, you know, maybe, I don't know. You could almost reverse it. Maybe you reverse it. Beren's the one who really wants to stay. You know, who refuses to leave the, you know, the land that he was born in, and doesn't see this until he, you know, until his father, he convinces his father to stay, and then his father and everybody is killed. And so then he's like burdened with guilt, right? Oh man, like if I hadn't insisted on staying, they would have left. And now they're dead and it's my fault. And like, now I'm going to leave like they wanted to, but it's just me. And now I'm like going burdened with guilt and weariness. Another option, right?
So what you're saying is, regardless of what the story is, the goal is to have the impact of everyone's death have maximum guilt for Beren.
I think Beren has to. Look, Beren is in a. Yes. Exactly. One of the maybe more of a motif than a theme of this season is the healing effect of Luthien, right? Mm-hmm. Beren staggers into Doriath half dead, right? And revives, sees Luthien, and his life is changed, and he revives, right? In the end, Thingol is going to be half dead of grief after Luthien's death, and Luthien is going to return and touch him, and he is going to revive, and flowers are going to spring up, right? The whole like flowers spring up where she goes Luthien effect, right, needs to be a motif. And even the way in which we can play on that same thing with Huon, right? The heart of Huon, right, coming to life and new recognition when Luthien encounters him. Even Luthien's destruction of the tower, right? I mean, like it's the especially the way that we've contrived it, right, with the pot of evil. She sets people free, right? You know, she's, you know, just as the flowers and the sun are set free when Luthien comes, so the spirits in bondage are set free in Tol and Garahoth. Even the sleep of the folks in Angband can almost be in this way. I mean, remember her words to Karkaroth, right? Where she's like, rest. You know, you, oh, woe-begotten spirit, she says, right? She has pity on this evil spirit that is animating Karkaroth, and she gives him rest. Like she get, you know, he has the nicest nap of his entire life, right? You know, and like she brings peace where she goes, right? Even in Angband, she brings peace. I mean, that's the thing. Like I'm really looking. I obviously we don't go like full scale comedy with this, right? But like when she puts everybody to sleep in Angband, they need to look really peaceful, right? Like for the first time, like to see like these orc faces that we've only seen in like Grimaces of Rage be like, you know, they should be almost unrecognizable because they're like, you know, like in peaceful slumber, possibly the only peaceful slumber they've enjoyed in their entire lives, right? Anyway, like the Luthien effect, it's a big deal, right? So do I really want Beren to be like all torn up in lots? Yeah, I do. I want him all torn up in lots of ways because I want the Luthien effect, right? I want to see him healed by her, right? Not just see him falling in love with her, but to see him healed. But that seems to me a really important element of the Beren and Luthien's like meeting scene, right?
You're starting to sell me on it.
Okay. Like I said, we don't have to go like crazy far out of our way to, you know, like heap the tragedy on him and you know, it's, but I mean, look, he's he's got plenty of tragedy, right? We don't have to go far out of our way. I'm just saying, yeah, I think that it should not just be. But again, more importantly, I guess I don't really see, or I haven't yet been really seeing the mindset of the outlaws, like what it is, why are they there, what are they doing, because. Like, why didn't they go back with Finrod? I mean, again, I can see the answer, because there might still be people there. But it's been years now, right? Like, seriously? Are they real? I mean, okay, Gorlim's not going to leave. We know this. But all of them? Like, you know, are they all like, no, really, somewhere in Dorthonion there might be an innocent person who needs rescuing? You know, at some point, clearly, but they're not decamping. They're staying. So why? What? And anyway, that's why I wanted to kind of work that out.
There is another possibility, and that is their initial reason for going is to get the people out safely. But in the interim, a lot of orcs have moved in, and depending on the situation of where they are and where all the other orc camps are, perhaps getting out is no longer really a possibility. Like,
okay,
at some point, once you're in completely occupied territory,
right?
Like,
right, you're living behind enemy lines. So yeah.
So at this point, maybe the window of opportunity to like do their task and get out has closed, and they've accepted that they're gonna just have to stay here for the duration now.
And that's a very different mindset. Right.
Yes.
Like, they're coming, we cannot get out is a very different mindset for them. Right. But that, I mean, that can work. Right. Here's what I don't like about that. What I don't like about that is that, again, I'm thinking, obviously, the most important thing here to me, like why the state of mind of the band matters to me, is what it tells us about Baron's mindset when he leaves, right? Baron is going to leave, and that will mean something different depending on how we set that up, right? And here's the thing I don't like about the "we cannot get out" version, and that is, but Baron can, apparently, right? So either like what, he wasn't trying hard enough before, or he has
to go through Nendon Gorthub,
right?
Like, this isn't exactly a good idea.
Right. No, I mean, it's not, he's not exactly taking the highway out, but still, like, so what's different now? Is he more desperate to leave now than he was before? Is he like unencumbered by the deadwood that was keeping him from making it through that way? I mean, like, if they were desperate to leave, why didn't they go that way? And if there was a reason they didn't go that way before, I mean, I know it's a bad idea, right? But then why does he go that way now? Right? I mean, he's making a different choice than was being made before. That's like, at the end of the day, one way or the other, he's doing something different Baron alone goes a different way than Baron and Barahir together did. Why? Like, what is the explanation? Now, it's possible we could just, I mean, we talked about just having him physically hunted out, right? Like, I mean, he's just going to get caught, and he's just being pursued. That's plausible. I mean, like, I'm not saying that that's not plausible. I guess I'm just saying I don't like a choice which is ultimately passive to his character.
Right.
That's what I don't like.
The decision to leave Dorthonion is kind of an important moment for him. So
yeah,
if he doesn't make that decision and he just ends up in Nendon Gorthub by accident, that's right. That's a missed opportunity.
Right. And to think about that even one step further, even that's not a way out. Even having him chased out isn't a way out. I mean, isn't a way out of our problem. It's a way out of Dorthonion, but it's not a way out of our problem. Because if the band had been all like, we're behind enemy lines, we cannot escape, we're just going to stay here and fight until we all die, because we have no other option. Well, then when he's being chased, he chooses to run away instead of staying and dying, fighting and dying. And that's a different choice still, right? So like if the place where Beren is in is like, well, the gig is up, like, you know, the hounds are on my heels, I must, now there's no choice for me left but to go through Nandun Gortheb. Baloney. Of course there's a choice left open to him. The other choice left open to him is to stand there, Hurin-like, and fight until he dies, like that, which is what they had all decided to do, right? I mean, you know, so if he decides instead to run away, even if it means running through Nandun Gortheb, then that's it's a new plan, right? Which they could have made that plan before, but they didn't make that plan. So,
so what, I guess the question becomes, what changes once it's just Beren?
Yeah, something is different, right?
Because it's either got to be a logistical thing of like, well, I can't fight anymore, so my only choice left is to try to run, or it's he alone is willing to try to flee through Nandun Gortheb, but maybe when other folks were there, he wasn't willing. You know, they didn't want to go or something. So, but something must have changed.
Something must have changed. Yeah. And that's why I admit also to kind of wanting, I think part of the reason that I was thinking in terms of like a debate over whether they go or whether they stay is that I'm still thinking, I'm wanting to kind of carry over some season 5 thematic ideas about humans and like their whole House of Baor thing, right? Like what are we accomplishing in our lives, right? And that's why I think somebody, maybe it's Beren, maybe it's Barahir, maybe it's somebody else, but I don't think we really need anybody else but the two of them in Gorlim. That's probably enough characters with speaking with lines, right? Probably in those episodes. But anyway, you know, you guys can see what you think about that. But anyway, and obviously it's not Gorlim who's ever going to be arguing to leave, so we know that. It's the one absolute given. But anyway, the point is, what I like about the no, we should stay, you know, until we die side versus the no, we're not accomplishing anything here, we should leave. It's a very human from season 5 kind of argument to be having, right? Like, what are we doing with the time that is given to us? At the end of the day, very little up here, so let's leave. So if one way, like whichever side he was, I could make it work with it either way, right? Him arguing to leave, him arguing to stay, either one of them ending up with him leaving. He'd be leaving with different baggage depending on which way it went, right? But either way, he's making a choice to leave, right? He says, okay, I'm going, but he doesn't have a plan, right? He's forced to go the route that he would not have chosen to leave Dorthonion by, right? But nevertheless, he's determined. I definitely want to see him taking the road through the Ered Gorgoroth, as if there's a road, you know, making his way through the Ered Gorgoroth, like on purpose. Like, this should be an act of strength on Beren's part, right? He is daring to do it despite the fact that he knows that it's almost certain death, and not have him be all like, you know, well, crap, I'm in the Ered Gorgoroth. How did that happen? Now I'm surely going to die, right? I mean, I would like him to sort of choose to do that, again, for it to be a strong decision on his part. But anyway, yeah, well, we don't have to resolve this right now, necessarily. No. So that was a good example of me not spending too much time on that. So I think that was good. Meanwhile, what does Luthien do? What's up with Luthien?
So Luthien.
Luthien, yeah, exactly. Let's talk about Luthien. How has she progressed? Again, the last thing we saw was that like proto conflict between her and her father, right? Not really a conflict yet, but the beginnings of at least as I say, a difference in sentiment between her and her father. How have things changed? Has she learned any? What would she have heard? Would she have heard? She'd probably have heard more about the people of Halath, maybe. She certainly would have heard the Tevildo story from Beleg.
Right. Beleg and Thingol both had a bit of change since that earlier decision, in the sense that they met men. Thingol personally met Halath. Right. And Beleg spent time with the people of Haleth and got to know them a little bit. So there's been a revised opinion of who men are based on from the original reports that Galadriel was giving was the Elvish perspective of having met a handful of men, but now they've met them in person. So there has been a shift there. There's also been a war since then.
Well, yeah, the Dagor
and
Bragollach.
men took part in that, and the people of Doriath did not. So that changes.
So,
too.
Do we have a Luthien who is now more actively chafing against her father's isolationist policies? That would make her pretty actively in a different camp from her dad. Like that would open a fairly big gap between the two of them. I'm not 100% sure I'm comfortable with as big a gap as that. But look, people in
there has to be a different perspective, a different viewpoint, because based on who Luthien is, she's not anywhere near as fearful as Thingol is.
Right.
And therefore they see things very differently.
And also, right, they do. But again, I don't want to, we certainly can't make Luthien a rebellious teenager mentality against her dad. We can't, apart from the fact that that's hideously cliched.
Let's not.
No, it totally changes the dynamics of, we don't want goth Luthien, right? Just trying to tick off her father. But we do, because, and here's the main reason that I'm thinking here. I'm thinking about the dynamics. I have the treehouse, up above my head here in my background. I don't want to change the dynamics of that too much, right? So to me, the choice to lock Luthien up in the treehouse that's Thingol saying, my daughter is an innocent and has no idea what's going on out there, and I have to protect her from herself. Right? That's Thingol's rationale for locking her up in the treehouse. If we show her being rebelling against her father's policies, if we see her as a political opponent of her father, right? Then it becomes a factionalist issue that she's being locked in her, you know what I mean? It sounds like, I'm punishing a potential rebel or something like that. We don't want that dynamic. Therefore, also we want some movement in Luthien's character, right? We want her to learn some stuff. So that's a good question. What does Luthien learn over the course of this season? How does she change from episode 1 to episode 13?
I think she certainly discovers that she's more limitless than she would have known prior to this. She's always had these abilities and she's always been who she is, but she's never been tested before.
Right.
And throughout the season, she just keeps ramping it up and never meets an opponent who's worthy of her.
Right. And it's interesting, again, especially in the context of what I was just talking about, what we saw in season 5, right? That human desire to, seize the day, right? To use the moment, we have a small amount of time and we want to accomplish something. We want to use the abilities that we have in the time that is given to us to accomplish something. Luthien has had this, phenomenal power that she's done almost nothing. Comparatively nothing with in her life. There have been these moments, right? Enough to show what's possible, right? Enough to show what's there, especially the Merith Atherthod thing, right? In the Merith Atherthod, we could see the glimpse of the kind of power that Luthien had, what she was able to, she was the one who brought peace to the Merith Atherthod when it was looking like it might splinter apart. She brought peace to it. what would she do if she like makes a plan and exerts herself, right? If she didn't just stay in the forest all the time. But again, but she's not driven. She's not human, right? So she's not going to be. We you know, we also can't have her like you know, Ariel at the beginning of The Little Mermaid either. You know, feeling like she's locked away and never gets to see the world, right? And wanting to get out and see the world. Like I don't see us taking that angle with Luthien at the start either.
Yeah, I know it came up on the boards a few times that people wanted there to be something that was missing in her life, so that when Beren enters the picture, to be like, oh, that's why Luthien is so into him. Like,
right?
There would be something that he would be bringing to the picture that no one else in Doriath ever had, that we could see she is interested in. Like before,
and that could be it, right? That could be it. I mean, ironically, it could even be like her father's stratagem, right? The oath, right? Beren's oath, I mean, which basically kind of unlocks this for her. That, so again, like what she could get from him, from Beren, I mean, is exactly that like human drive to accomplish something, to get out there and do something, right? She's never had that. She's never been that. She's been content to just, you know, sing and dance in Doriath and make flowers spring out of the ground, right? That's like what she does. That's her 9 to 5. But then she meets Beren, and it's not like as soon as she meets Beren, she's like, yes, I'm going to go like get a part-time job. And like, no, but when Beren leaves, right now she has a thing. There's a thing she wants to go and do, and it's to rescue him, to help him, to save him, right? So again, and I like this because, of course, the irony is she would never have had the desire to leave if her father hadn't tried to prevent Beren from marrying her, right? But the stratagem that Thingol puts into place to send Beren off to his probable death is the thing that for her that like tips her, that unlocks this for her. I mean, it's Beren, but it's also kind of indirectly and ironically her father, and I think that would be kind of cool. So I don't know, what do you think of this? What if at the beginning we show Luthien as primarily naive? Like I don't think she's aware that she's missing anything. I think we just like she and Dairon are out there singing and dancing and you know, like it's what you do. You like dance in the woods. And then she meets Beren. We have an attraction there. I don't think she knows why yet, right? And we see the change in her comes when she now wants something. She's now sees like, you know, that whole idea, like, is there, like, she has potential that is being wasted is a thought that never crossed her mind ever before, right? But now Beren is out there, he's in danger. I can do something about that, and I want to go do something about that. And so now I'm going to go, and she is still innocent, right? I mean, like the beginning of the Nargothrond stuff, like she's you can see that in the text, I think, like when she meets Celegorm and Curufin, and they're like, oh, come back with us and we'll like take care of everything, and she's like, okay. And then, you know, they lock her up when they get her back in. Like there's some naivete there from her, I think. I mean, I gotta think that Aredhel, I mean, Aredhel's a bad example because she was a friend of Celegorm, but like ignoring that for a second, I think Aredhel would have been like a little wiser to the situation, right? Now you could say, right, like she was hardly under the circumstances. Eowl's a different, okay, fine. Aredhel was a bad example. Galadriel would not have been like just snookered like that, right? She would have, you know, when Curufin and Celegorm were like, oh yes, come back and we'll take care of everything, she would have smelled a rat, right? She would have been like, you know, this Curufin dude, I don't trust him as far as I could kick him, right? Even if she didn't know him already. But Anyway, see what I mean? Like, it's like Luthien. Like, if we, no, we don't want to go too far. Obviously, and I don't mean that we make her like sort of disgustingly naive and simple-minded, but there should be an innocence about her. Like she, So I'm like, the more I'm thinking about, the less I like the idea of like a Luthien who is fretting over current events, right, and worrying about like wanting to go out and see the world, and more uneasy about her father's isolationist policies and things like that. The less I like that idea, and the more I want her to be. She dances in the woods. This is what she does, right?
I agree that Luthien dances in the woods. That is indeed what she does.
That is indeed what she does.
And
yes,
I would therefore definitely want to see her doing that.
Yeah.
At the beginning of this season, before Beren enters the picture. Like, I 100% agree with that. And if we were having Beren and Luthien meet almost immediately, then I would say that's all we need. Is just establish who she is and then get on with it. But most likely it's going to take a little bit of time to work through Beren's storyline in Dorthonion. Right. Because we have to do the whole Goylem story, and then we have to get him out of there and do his whole thing solo.
Yeah.
By the time he gets to Doriath, we need to have told some story with Luthien other than Luthien is an elf who dances in the woods.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing. I started laughing because as you were talking, I was picturing, like in every episode, cut to Doriath, still dancing. There she is, like another day, another dance in the woods. Like that actually, like, I'm not really suggesting it because it would almost certainly come off as comical in a way that we don't want people laughing at Luthien ever, much less established at the beginning to make her an object of comedy. But despite the fact that I know it's a bad idea, there's something really kind of appealing to sort of show like the movement and the trauma and the all the Beren going through ordeal after ordeal, and meanwhile, like, here's Luthien, like, unchanged, in everything, one day is much like the rest in Doriath. That contrast, I find it intellectually appealing. I don't think we could do it without it coming off ways we don't want it to, but I find that conceptually sort of appealing. I'm wondering, one way that I can imagine doing more stuff without showing her, because part of me doesn't really want her to have any character movement before Beren comes, essentially. I think I don't want that, but anyway, so what if we don't spend that much time with her ourselves? Like, we can spend more time with Thingol and Melian and even Dairon. Right? It's like people can talk about Luthien in those first few episodes, and we can see her, but like sort of see her from, I'm kind of imagining like we sort of set Luthien up indirectly, right? By having her discussed, by having people talk about, like, maybe we even have discussions between Dairon and Thingol and Melian about like Dairon and Luthien getting married, right? Maybe we're actively beginning to discuss that. I kind of think that has to be dealt with sooner or later, right? We're not making them siblings, so fiancés was the other option, really, we already chose to have them be like presumptive fiancés, right?
Right. They are very good friends who spend a lot of time together, and presumably everyone thinks they're going to get married someday.
Right. Exactly.
Except Luthien.
Except Luthien. Right. Yes, exactly. And this is one of the things that I think that we can accomplish by basically having the audience kind of seeing Luthien from afar and seeing her through the eyes of others in the first couple episodes. I know this is kind of a counterintuitive approach in some ways, but this way we can kind of set up who Luthien is and what Luthien means to others, right? In different ways, right? and then have, you know, the first time we really are following her be the central character on camera is the big dancing in the woods day when Baron shows up, right? And that's that's really the beginning of her unique story. And before that, she's sort of an object of speculation and discussion by everyone, including us. I'm not saying we never show her on camera. Like, she can appear, you know, she can walk through the room or whatever. We can see her from a distance.
But we're not telling her story from her perspective.
Not until she meets Baron, yeah. Because here's the other thing that I think we could accomplish this way. And I'm doing a lot of arguing for it. I'm not 100% sure I'm sold on this idea yet, but I'm working it through here. The other thing that we really need to accomplish is, like, what Luthien means. And we're not going to get that from her, right? I mean, okay, yeah, like, her dad loves her. Okay, we don't need to go very far out of our way to establish that, right? But there's more, right? Luthien already means more, not just to her parents, but to everybody in Doriath, and even, like, all of Elvendom. She's a big deal. She's very famous already. How? Yes. For what? Like, and that we need to establish, and we can best establish that by having people talking about her. Right?
Okay, so the one thing that people came up with is what could be different in Doriath now than the last 3 seasons. Right. And it was that maybe some Sindar refugees from the north have fled to Doriath on account of the Dagor Bragollach, where they're trying to get away from the war. And if they're Sindar, Thingol would let them in, presumably. And if they're not, then gates are closed. So we could establish that Doriath is a closed kingdom, which would be helpful before Baron gets there.
Yeah.
But this would also be an opportunity for outsiders to meet Luthien. So if we're following the refugees and their storyline, and they get to meet Thingol's court, which includes Luthien, and we see how they view her and what she means to the people of Doriath and what she means through the eyes of these newcomers, that could be a story that wouldn't be. And Luthien is petitioning her dad to do things differently because she's unhappy with how he's running his court. Like, because I agree that that's not the story we want to tell with her. Mm-hmm. Like, her involvement with the court has been very minimal to this point.
Yes.
Like, she's had personal one-on-one conversations with Melian or Thingol about various issues that have been going on, but she's not a political figure.
She's not an activist. Yeah. I the more I think about it, the more I dislike the idea of Luthien as activist in the court, right? Trying to influence policy one way or another. Because again, then there is an inevitable political dimension to the conflict with her dad, right? Later on, and that I don't want there to be a political overlay to that. That needs to be just personal. I mean, there's a political element, obviously, like Celegorm and Curufin come in, and now there's a political element, right? But there, it's all about the politics that are at stake because of her and who she is, right? And again, there's this element. Remember, I mean, there's this element. It's fairly strong. I think it's stronger in the Lay of Leithian than it is in the Silmarillion version of the Beren and Luthien story. When Luthien is on the loose, right, and rumors start spreading that Luthien is on the loose, everybody, Morgoth on down, right, everybody's just, like, curious. They're like, oh, yeah, we've heard about this Luthien one, right? She's supposed to be, like, the greatest, most, I mean, this is like the jewel of Elvendom, right? Mm-hmm. And everyone's like, we want to check that out, right? I mean, everybody is like, so Celegorm and Curufin are like, whoa, Luthien, it's so, like, the rumors are true. Holy cow, right? Is one of their reactions to it. I mean, the whole Bulldog battle thing came out because they heard that Luthien was out on the loose. Right? I mean, like, it starts whole movements of armies even in the Lay of Leithian, I mean. So anyway, she's a big deal, right? And I think establishing her not just as Daddy's little girl, right? She's obviously a big deal in that way to Thingol. But establishing that she's like a continental big deal, you know what I mean? And again, by having people talking about, by showing, Daeron, I think, would, I don't know, would he reflect that? I mean, maybe you wouldn't get it from Dairon. Maybe you would get it from, through Dairon.
So
yeah, I don't know.
Part of the whole Dairon situation, I'm a little reluctant to start the season by Dairon petitioning Thingol, like, hey, can I marry your daughter? Based on how many more times someone is going to petition Thingol in the next 2 months. Hey, can I marry your daughter? Like, Luthien is what, 3,000 years old now or something? So, like, why did this
Rush
week everyone wake up
yeah,
on a
no, exactly, right?
So, like, it might feel a little weird, but that's not really the issue. My main concern is if Luthien knows that Dairon is trying to court her, then her sudden interest in Beren might look a little bit more like desperate to find an alternative.
Right. Yeah, we don't want to make him look
really
like
don't want a rebound situation. Yeah,
exactly.
Like,
right. Yeah. So, any warm-blooded male who walks through the door and isn't Dairon. Yeah. It could really. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah.
So to avoid that, but still, if you want to bring up the potential there, other people could be asking Dairon, like, so when are you two getting married?
Right.
And he could be like, that's not happening.
Right.
So we could establish whether or not he's interested, but still not make it like he's actively trying to force her into anything.
Oh yeah. So
what if Dairon's not interested? What if he's just like her friend?
How is Dairon not interested?
Well, okay, fair enough.
This is Luthien.
It's Luthien, for crying out loud. Like, every sentient organism is interested in Luthien, right? I mean, seriously, is there a sentient organism with whom she comes into contact who's not interested? I mean,
but one of the points of that is that Luthien therefore brings out different aspects of how someone loves someone else.
Yeah.
And she can bring out the worst in someone. You know, I mean, Morgoth is quite interested in her too, but that's not a positive thing.
Right.
So Dairon definitely 100% loves Luthien. No question. But they are best friends. And is there any reason that it has to be something other than that?
Yeah. So I am going to, this is me being really virtuous, because I am like twitching with the desire to say, okay, let's talk about Dairon's story. But I'm not doing that, because if we do that, I'm never going to do the episode structure for these. So I'm saving that. We're going to come back to I want to approach Dairon from scratch. I want to, be like, who is this guy and what is his story going to be? Like, I want to figure out his entire arc, not all of which need necessarily be in this season. Oops, is that my spoiler that I don't want to kill off Dairon this season? Yeah, I kind of don't want to kill off Dairon this season, but I don't even know. I honestly haven't even made up my mind about what I would want Dairon's story to be, other than a general discontentment with his vague disappearance. I've always hated Dairon's vague disappearance. What the heck happened to Dairon has been always one of my top 10, frustratingly unresolved questions in the Silmarillion. So, darn it, I want to answer that question. But anyway, so we'll get there. But we'll only talk about that right now. But anyway, okay. So, but there's, but I do. You're absolutely right. We certainly don't want her to be aware that she is under pressure from Dairon and seeking to escape from him, and then it looks like Beren is the escape valve, right? We certainly don't want that. So I agree. We definitely avoid that. Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Okay. So the more I'm thinking about it, the more I still like the idea of Luthien herself not actually doing much. But I think that we could spend plenty of time talking about her and establishing. We could even sprinkle references to her from outside Doriath, right? it's hard because it's been, I mean, other than with Galadriel would have an easy excuse to bring her up if we, not that we necessarily had plans to go back to Galadriel at the beginning of the season, but anyway, she was known, she met them at the Merith Atherthad, so, you know, even others like Finrod and Fingon have met her before. I don't know. I'm not going to fret over the details. But
as
again,
many different perspectives.
From
the outside.
From the outside.
Before we get to tell her story from her perspective.
Exactly. And even here's another thing. Here's another seed that I think that we can plant in the context. Not that anyone is making this connection, right? But I'm imagining kind of two focal points of conversation at the beginning, like among Elvendom, right? One can be Luthien, right? In various ways, primarily in Doriath, obviously, but like Luthien, and Luthien is awesome, right? Luthien is like the shining hope of Elvendom, right? On the one hand. And on the other hand, okay, the Dagor Bragollach, that was awful, right? And it was not an utter catastrophe, right? It was like only an 80% catastrophe rather than a 100% catastrophe. Like there is some chance that we could partially recover from what just happened there, right? But it was pretty bad. And something needs to happen. Like if something doesn't happen, if like some unexpected thing does not come to help us, I don't see how we can move forward from this, right? Like this sense of, and you see the connection that I'm making ultimately, right? Now, again, nobody makes this connection. There isn't anybody out there who's like, if only that Luthien chick would get into gear, like, you know, we could make a difference in the world, right? No one's saying that. But again, we have those 2 points, right? And Luthien is the one, ultimately, who is kind of, and again, she's not out there like to save the world. She's out there to save Beren, right? But what will be happening, in fact, is that Luthien on the loose, shaking up the world, is in fact going to be this like totally unanticipated new variable in the dynamics of Beleriand, right? And that's of course where what's going to get us to season 7 and Maedhros, right, leading up to the Nirnaeth, right? So I think that those are the 2 points that we need to establish in the beginning of the season, right? Like we're hosed if something doesn't happen, right? Something different has to, you know, there's no point. I mean, look, the Leaguer failed as it was, right? What are we going to do? Like, just like buck up and rebuild it? You know, there's a gaping hole in the middle of it. There are fewer of us left. Like, there's no reestablishing that it was insufficient as it was, and we can't even get back to there, right? So what can we do? What can happen? What is, you know, something needs to happen. And then Luthien is awesome, right? Luthien is like head and shoulders, like she is like really special. There is like some amazing potential in Luthien. And again, nobody's like, obviously we have to be very careful about this. Nobody's making that connection. And I would ideally like not even the viewers to be making that connection. Like I don't even want to be hinting at it. And Luthien herself isn't going to make it like ever. That's not how she thinks either, right? It's only going to be from the outside.
Right.
That anyone will.
No, definitely. Yeah. It's a very unexpected answer to the problem of what do we do after the Dagor of Bragollach?
Yeah.
Send one person to take out Morgoth. Okay, we tried that. That's what Fingolfin did. Like, it was crazy when he did it, and it didn't work. So for Luthien to, well, I mean, she doesn't kill him, but still,
right?
No one's expecting that. So I don't think it'll be difficult to avoid the characters making that connection.
Right.
Depending on how heavy-handed we are, the audience will be like, I see what you're doing there.
Right. Exactly. We have to be very careful about it. But again, this is all kind of my answer to the question, what do we do? Like Beren is doing his thing, right? Beren and Barahir are doing their thing for a couple episodes. What's happening in Elvendom, right? What's happening with Luthien and in Elvendom? And my answer is this is what we're kind of setting up, and showing, we the Luthien story is just so much fun in so many ways. Like the way that we're setting it up. I mean, the way that just showing it on screen sets it up. It sounds like an origin story, right? Like a superhero origin story. Like, here was Luthien with this like tremendous power and potential, just like minding her own business and dancing in the forest, right? But then one day, like, she had a gritty experience, Uncle Ben dies or whatever, and then off she goes and starts saving the world, right? And now becomes this great superhero. It almost has that shape, except it's totally not that shape, right? It's like way more interesting than that shape. She's not trying to save the world. And yet, anyway, so there's so much fun here, I think, that kind of can be had. And the shape of her story is really, I think it's legitimately unlike almost any hero story. I mean, it goes in a very unexpected direction. I think that's, I don't know. I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's a lot of fun that we can do a lot with, and we need to not be afraid of that. Even to like the end of the story is probably going to seem like a big anticlimax to people, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, surely the moment when she and Beren return from death, they're going to come back and it's going to be like the end of Avengers Endgame, right? Or something, right? Everybody comes back and then there's the big battle and victory, right? And they're going to come back. She's going to heal Thingol, and they're going to go into quiet retirement in Osirian, right? And I got to think a lot of people watching the show would be like, what just happened there? Like, what was accomplished there? Now, I mean, we need to make sure we're doing, I mean, there are things that we're doing, right? There are a bunch of things that we're going to be putting in place to sort of show in the shape of the overall season. At the end of the day, release from bondage is the theme, right? And that's what we're showing. This is not a save the world story in the end, but it's going to look and feel like a save the world story at some point, right? Especially even the timing. Think of the timing, right? Again, I keep thinking of like your typical like action movie plot shape, right? Think of where the Angband sequence falls in the normal action movie sequence shape, right? Like the moment where like there's this big like early, not really early, but like mid-range boss fight, and then but it's a failure ultimately, and like the hero is grievously wounded and it looks like everything's horrible, and they come back, and then then eventually we recover and have a triumphant victory at the end, right? It feels like that. It's going to feel like, man, look at what she did in Angband, right? Imagine what she's going to do at the climax of the show, right? Oh, man, then we're going to get Luthien unleashed. Like, that's just the warm-up act. This is going to be amazing. And what is Luthien unleashed? Look, what is the pinnacle of her, like, what's the moment when she fulfills her potential? And the answer is her song before Mandos. That's the moment. That's the big pinnacle. Right? That's the boss fight for Luthien. The boss fight is with death, ultimately. Right? Mm-hmm. And that's like, no one doesn't know the story is going to see that coming. Right?
But she chooses death.
Yeah.
Like, it's, yeah.
It's wild. This is what I love about this story. I think that this is just like super, and of course we can see, unsurprisingly, because of the way in which it parallels this story again and again, we can see a similar shape in the Lord of the Rings, right? With Frodo's sacrifice and his departure, right, to the Grey Havens at the end. I thought you would enjoy the Shire for years and years, says Sam, right? It's been saved, but not for me, says Frodo. Like there's echoes of the end of the Beric Luthien story in the Lord of the Rings as well. It's not exactly the same, but again, there's echoes, there's ripples that are like it. But this is the main deal. This is the big thing. Anyway, so but I'm not getting anywhere anymore. Okay, let's talk about the outline. Hang on, we had ideas. I've totally skipped the ideas. Okay, perhaps Doriath is accepting Sindar refugees, right? Mm-hmm. They would be. Hang on, let's think about that a second. Okay, wait, perhaps Luthien is feeling dissatisfied. Right now, I don't think she's dissatisfied. I think she's just dancing in the woods. Perhaps Dairon has decided to make his intentions clear, right? We talked about that, right? Or again, maybe external pressure even on him, right? Not pressure exactly. Who pressures elves to get married, right? Like, you better hurry. Her biological clock is ticking, and in another 500 years, it'll be anyway. Whatever. Perhaps Luthien expresses some dissatisfaction with Thingol's leadership. Yeah, I don't think we want to do the political thing. So I think we've talked about most of these already. The first one I think we can definitely do, and we can have those can be some of the people talking, right? Ooh, in fact, I like. Yeah. Here's a cool role for the Sindar refugees, right? They will have met Luthien, right? Possibly for the first time, if they've been away from Doriath for a long time, right? Well, no, they would have at the Marathadathad probably, but anyway, whatever. It's been a long time, right? And they're in again, we have the Luthien effect, right? They come wounded, grieving, terrified, into Doriath, and they meet Luthien, and flowers spring up, right? We can show, not that like we show them being like, everything is lovely now and I love my life because I met Luthien, right? Like, it's not like that, obviously, but again, they have met Luthien, right? We can even show her interacting with refugees, right? I mean, we could show her, being a blessing to the refugees and helping them. They would be certainly a good opportunity both for us to show the Luthien effect, that, people are healed when they come into contact with Luthien. And secondly, we can show, those are other people to talk about her and to emphasize what a big deal she is, right? Because, these other Sindar who have been out around Beleriand, right, are now coming in after the Dagor Bragollach. They've known bunches of elf kings and queens, right? And there's nobody like Luthien. And they will know that, right? I mean, everyone in Doria thinks there's nobody like Luthien, but they're sheltered, right? How many elf princesses do they know, right? I mean, like, saying she's the greatest elf princess in Doriath is not saying a whole lot. So, but, you got somebody from Dorthonion, somebody from, whatever. Anyway. Yeah, so there's definitely another angle from which some of the Luthien stuff could come. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the shape. All right. So we've got, all right, Sauron is orange and yellow. Here. Nargothrond is green. Beren is blue. Okay. Luthien is, she's a solid bar. Luthien is like, see, that's just like humans and elves in a nutshell right there.
I was leaving that open to wait for your discussion.
No, I love that.
What her storyline would be.
Yeah. Nothing. No change. Yeah. No, that's great. I love it. Okay. So, let's start with Sauron, because that was the story that we decided before. So we start with the fall of Tol Sirion in episode 1. That we'd already, the necromancy and the capturing the tower. We'd already pretty much decided on that. Then we have Thuringwethel sent to Dorthonion in episode 2. Great. Which means the establishment of the pot of evil happens in episode 2 while Thuringwethel's away, right? so that she comes back and is like, what the heck, right? So the capture of the, like, we don't, you know, we can have, like, the end of Sauron's role in episode 1 is just like Sauron striding through the now open gates of Tel Sirion or whatever. Like, you know, he's just captured it in episode 1. Episode 2, you know, he starts to, you know, rearrange the furniture and establish pots of evil, right? So, like, this is, now we're establishing the conversion of Tel Sirion, of, you know, of Minas Tirith to Thorin Garhoth, right? Tolan Garhoth. So, okay, so there we are. So that's what Sauron's doing. Meanwhile, Thorin is going to Dorthonion. She's learning Gorlim's secret. That's still in episode 2? She learns that in episode 2?
Probably. Again, there's a lot of aftermath with Beren after the outlaws are all dead. Mm-hmm. So presumably you are going to want to kill them off by the end of episode 2.
I would think so. Yeah, I mean, obviously we can't kill them off in episode 1. I don't think we do much about them. We just establish that they exist, right? In episode 1. So whatever it is that we're doing, whatever we decide about what their mentality and choices are, right, needs to be established in episode 1, right? So if there is going to be any back and forth, any, you know, do we stay or do we go discussion, that happens in episode 1, right? So that those lines are clearly drawn, because then everything starts happening in episode 2 up there. Okay, so the whole Gorlim story, basically. So we need to establish Gorlim's character, which is kind of one-dimensional, so that's not too hard to establish in episode 1. And then, so we got the Gorlim sequence, Thuringwethel, Gorlim, and then, so we're contemplating ending episode 2 with Beren finding the mutilated corpse of his father.
Right. I was not
Possibly.
clear where to end the episode, because
there was like a good place.
Well, but there's also the possibility of Gorlim's ghost visiting Beren to warn him, right, and ending on a cliffhanger, so we don't discover the corpses until the beginning of the next episode. Or the ghost comes, he rushes back, and he walks into the massacre already over, and then we end it. So, like, there's possible places to cut it in that.
Couple good choices there.
There are.
Yeah.
Though I have to admit that that scene, and this is one of those moments, right? I mean, like those zoom in moments that we get in the Silmarillion, you know, story, that the
birds coming
vultures
up too late,
rising up. Oh my goodness, yeah.
I think it's crows or ravens.
Crows,
or something.
yeah, exactly. Oh, and then like the disturbing the carrion fowl that are, you know, feasting on his father and companions. That moment, you know, him coming into the camp and the birds flying up, that hard to beat that as the final scene in the episode, I think. But anyway, around there is definitely when we finish episode 2. Do we have Thuringwethel? I think Thuringwethel returning to Tel Sirion should be episode 3, probably. I think, because she's gonna have enough to do with, you know, Gorlim, handling Gorlim, and okay, then episode 3. We have him staggering. We end episode 3 with Beren staggering through the girdle of Melian, right? Presumably.
I think so.
Yeah.
My question to you is, how do you feel about waiting until episode 4 out of 13 to hear Tanuviel in the show? Is that acceptable to you?
In principle, sure, as long as we still have room to do everything else. I mean, so, okay. Let's think about it this way. We had decided that the destruction of the tower, right, the defeat of Sauron and the destruction of the tower, was going to be the sort of turning point, midpoint, but basically doesn't have to be the exact midpoint, but like episode 8-ish, Let's call it 8, because if we're looking at Tinuvial happening in 4, then 8's going to be the earliest we could possibly do that, right? So let's just think about this a little bit. Okay. What has to happen between 4 and 8? If 4 starts with Tinuviel, and ends with what? Beren walking out of the throne room on the quest for the Silmaril, right? If that happens in 4, then 5 is Beren gets to Nargothrond and him and Finrod leave, right? And maybe we can get them all the way to the dungeons, but that's a lot. But let's assume we can make it happen. Oh, yeah, hang on.
Right. So 5 is Nargothrond. 6.
Yeah.
Yeah. 6 is going to the dungeon with Tolsirian and everything. And then 7 is Luthien rescues Beren.
Okay.
Because while Beren is in the dungeons in Tolsirian, Luthien is in Nargothrond with Celegorm and Curufin.
Right.
So we can get Luthien bringing down the tower episode 7 with what we have. If we're very tight with how we do 5 and 6.
It's pretty crisp. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty crisp. Especially since, okay, so now let me go back to the green here, right?
Can be stuffed.
Yeah, it is stuffed. We've got Orodreth flees. Yeah, so we can't really accomplish anything because Tolsirian isn't falling until the end of the episode, right? So we do need to have Celegorm and Curufin showing up. You know, so maybe we even get them being sent out at the very beginning of the episode and getting them arriving at the end of the episode, right? Because, yeah, I would think that the Celegorm and Curufin assisting the refugees and thereby arriving triumphantly in Nargothrond sounds like a beginning of episode 2 thing, right? So they're now there in episode 2. If episode 3... Yeah, because now we've got like a long time in which they're not doing anything because we don't need them again until episode 5. If episode 4 is... Beren isn't walking out of Thingol's court until the end of episode 4. Nothing's happening in Nargothrond until episode 5 when Beren shows up.
It would be fine with me if all of episode 4 took place in Doriath. So that we do everything we need with our other stories in 1, 2, and 3. Yeah. And then we get just Doriath, because I think that story doesn't intercut well with other stories.
And it's not only the central episode, like of this story, it's arguably the central episode of Tolkien's entire fictional landscape for his whole life, right? I mean, like, seriously, is there any scene more central to Tolkien's thought than the Beren and Luthien encounter? Like, seriously, it's got to be on the short list. Like, it's really hard.
And if we're trying to portray Beren experiencing an encounter with Fairy, like, he needs to like enter into this magical world that's completely separate from everything that came before. Yeah, we can't be. And then
meanwhile, exactly. Yeah. We should lose ourselves in that as well. Yeah. No, I agree. I love that idea. Like, no B plot in episode 4. It's just all
whatever B plot is. It's a Doriath.
It's Doriath plot. Yeah, it's all. Yeah, it's all. So I mean, obviously, we're having Thingolmelion as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
episode 4 should definitely be a Doriath bottle episode.
Yeah, I like that.
Totally focused. Yeah, you're right. Like cutting away will not for that episode.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We don't even want to juxtapose anything with Beren meeting Luthien, right? I mean, that's. Yeah. Okay. Right. So then. First of all, can I just say we've totally accomplished what we needed to accomplish, I think. As long as it'll work. As long as we can get ourselves It's by
I
7 or
think-
8. The tower has to come down by 7 or 8. You know, and
Yeah.
that's so. Hang on. So wait, hang on. Let me continue thinking through it. But with the Baron version makes sense. Like it's easy enough to say episode 5 he goes to Nargothrond and heads off towards Tol Garhoth. Episode 6 they get captured. We get the Finrod Sauron battle, episode 6, and then they get into thrown in the dungeon, and then episode 7 he's let out of the dungeon by Luthien. But that skips a lot. Okay, because so in episode 5 Baron is gone. He's going to Nargothrond. Meanwhile, Luthien's getting locked in the treehouse, right? And presumably by the end of episode 5, leaves the treehouse, right? So we've got Luthien. So the scene unfolding now in progress behind me. End of episode 5, right? Credits roll after that scene. Great. Okay. Episode 6. Baron and Finrod now on the road north, encountering Sauron, ending up thrown in the dungeon. Meanwhile, Luthien meets Celegorm and Curufin, gets put under house arrest, meets Huon, talks Huon around, escapes.
I would save her escape till the next episode.
6. Right.
No. Till to 7.
Till 7. 7. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Because
So
if 7's
she's
gonna
placed
end
into
with the
house arrest,
tower.
and she's right. So
Yeah.
that is an appealing. Baron is thrown into the dungeon at the same time Luthien is put under house arrest. So everyone's in bondage, and then everybody gets released from bondage. But okay. I still feel like this is going to catch up with us sooner or later. But look, we'll keep going. Okay, so we have her soulful conversations with Huon by the end of episode 6, right? Ooh, and even the juxtaposition there, right? Luthien in prison with Huon, right? Baron in prison with werewolf coming to eat people, right? I mean, come on, that's kind of fun, actually. We can even have like a visual juxtaposition. It's cool. Anyhow, okay, so I mean, like horrible, but like in a cool way. So, all right, episode 7 dawns, right? Except not for Baron because he's in prison near the Pot of Evil, and he's taken care of. Luthien has to start the episode 7 by running away, right? So we get Huon talks, gives her cloak, she runs off. They run off together, right? They run off together. They arrive, fight at the tower, released from bondage. Okay, episode 7. I think that can work. And then, okay, so destruction, Thuringwethel's death. We can intersperse some Thuringwethel Sauron tension, right? We've set that up from episode 3, so we have plenty of time to pop in on them and show how that's not working out. Thuringwethel dies, Sauron flees, Luthien finds Baron, cut to credits, right? Luthien finds Baron, Baron holding body of Finrod, cut to credits, something like that, right? Well of, pot of evil souls blows up. Okay. Episode 8.
Deadway escapes.
Right, exactly. Episode 8, then. Celegorm and Curufin, banished from Nargothrond. Head north and find them in same episode? Has to be, doesn't it? We don't have time for them to... Not going to do anything else in the meantime.
Yeah, if we're going to do the whole Leap of Baron thing, it would have to be
Same
right.
episode.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, so we start off by banishing them, and then we do the Leap of Baron and the whole issue, and then that's episode 8. Okay. So then 9, Baron and Luthien now together still. This is where they make the decision to go, he tries to leave her and it doesn't work, and she follows him, and he's sings his song, and she catches up, and they go. So this is, wait, what did I say? This is 9. Yes, 8 was the Leap of Beren. So
9 is disguises.
Disguises. Yes, exactly. Disguises and journey. And so we end with what? Holy crap! Enormous Wolf at Gates of Angband or something like that, right? Because Angband, we don't put Angband into the butt end of an episode, right? So if that's going to be, if the, and we can maybe do something else there. But anyway, that gets us to 10 then. Episode 10 is the Angband episode. This is the Dancing Before Morgoth episode, ending with the eagles taking off with them, presumably, right? Flying off with eagles, and Beren not bleeding to death due to means that this happens. And so that's, what did I say, 10? That's 10. And then 11 is the arrival. Thingol's big moment comes in episode 11, right? Thingol's big moment of forgiveness, and everybody's happy except the hunt for the wolf, right? Episode 11, hunt for the wolf. We end with Beren's corpse and Huon's corpse, right?
I think that might be, I think we might be able to put the hunt for the wolf in episode 12.
We could, well,
but it depends on where you're trying to cut things here.
Yeah, because I'm
I know you want healing Thingol's. You want to heal Thingol's winter and have there be time for that on screen.
Yeah. I want Aftermath, not in season 7. So if we do hunt for the wolf in episode 11, right? Beren's corpse, Huon's corpse.
That would be a lot because it's their wedding and hunt for the wolf, and he dies.
Oh yeah.
Like so episode 11 is going to be pretty
meaty
packed.
episode.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, let's see, because then 12. I mean, look, we have Mandos, right?
Right.
I mean, big deal. This is the climax of the whole thing, right? So Mandos happens in episode 12. I don't want to. Then we need healing of the winter of Thingol and the retirement into I feel like we need an episode for. I don't want to squeeze the post Mandos experience into 10 minutes.
Okay, so you'd much rather squeeze the Thingol accepting Beren and the hunt for the wolf into one episode.
I could understand how people would want to be like, so yeah, the actual wedding of Beren and Luthien you're wanting to squeeze into 5 minutes in the middle of an otherwise action-packed episode. It's not that I can't see the counter arguments against that. I'm just saying that
at that point it maybe isn't a climactic event anymore.
It's not. It doesn't feel like a climactic event to me.
Where's the hunt for the wolf and Beren's death? Yeah,
Beren's death. That's a much bigger deal, right? I mean, it's and there's a sense in which even like their wedding itself, they're like, you think about the events that bookend it, right? Like her actions of self-sacrifice, like they may not, have had their ceremony yet, but they're kind of married, like they're bound together already. They already were. I mean, Thingol's acceptance is kind of a recognition of fact at that point. It's still big of him, right? And I don't want to I'm not trying to undermine him, but it's Beren and Luthien are a done deal by that point, right? I mean, like, they've shown this. It's what is a big deal about their marriage, their wedding, in a sense, is Thingol, right? It's Thingol's acceptance, right? But yeah, between like what they've already gone through and what they go through afterwards in Mandos, like all of those things seem to me more important than the actual ceremony. Anyway, we can obviously this is brainstorming and we'll see what it actually looks like when we get to it, but I just wanted to make sure that we actually have time for the things that we want to do, and there's a whole bunch of subplots and everything that we didn't put into that quickly brainstormed episode. I just want to make sure that the whole shape fits. It's still, there's something that still feels rushed about episode 7 for the downfall of the tower, and I don't know why. I don't know what like, I'm having some internal resistance to that. Maybe it's just because I had it in my head as happening in episode 10, and I'm having a hard time letting go of that. maybe I think also it feels kind of hasty on the Nargothrond front. But I guess not. I mean, she's going to be pretty much in Nargothrond and in prison for a whole episode. So that's plenty of time to do some work there. And I think the thing, I think the main, I think what it is that there's the fall of the tower. There's a lot that needs to happen there, right? The Tower in the Tall in Garhoth sequence. I have a really hard time pronouncing that word properly fast. Is involved. There's a lot going on there, right? Between the Huan fights, and we've added like what's going on with Thuringwethel as well, and like the Pot of Evil, and the conflict with Sauron, and then the releasing of and then P.S. like Finrod is dying, right? So we're gonna have to have the werewolf attacking, Beren, and Finrod like ripping out its throat with his teeth, and anyway, so like and then the rescue, and then the mourning over Finrod, who's a huge character in our story, right? It's a lot. Like, that whole sequence is a lot. And so starting that episode with her in house arrest, right? And doing the business with her and Huan, and then adding that to the front of the episode is, I think it's what it's making me, like, I would kind of want to end an episode with like her and Huan, yeah, exactly. Like she and Huan like are looking over like the top of her eyes at the tower, and like that whole sequence is going to start at the beginning of an episode there. So maybe we can, I don't know.
It was more of a, we can make the tower fall down in episode 7.
Yeah, no, I think we can. Even if we accelerate what happens with her in episode
we do
6.
have to decide which pieces are in which episode, and that is probably still up for debate.
Yeah, I agree, and we'll see as we get closer to that.
But it sounds like you're okay with the story of Beren.
Well, that's why I was.
The reason I'm thinking
all the way through is because my gut impulse is like, whoa, that's late. Are we still going to have time for everything else, right? But I say that's late. I was kind of assuming episode 3 was what I had in my head. So it's only one episode later than I was assuming, because I did know that we were going to, the Beren stuff was going to have to be. But yeah, I mean, I agree. Because we need to have the necromancy and the sack of Tol Sirion be really the centerpiece of episode. That's like the A plot of episode 1, right? And Beren is like maybe the B plot, maybe the C plot. I mean, it's just established. It's only an establishment thing. And so therefore, because in my head, I was thinking establish the outlaws and kill off most of them. And I was kind of thinking Gorlim episode 1, basically. And then the flight, and then Tinuviel in episode 3. But the necromancy, at Tol Sirion really does push that back one. Oh, it's fine. I think we can do it. I mean, as I've sort of whispered before, I was a little worried that we would end up having to cut or diminish like the Leap of Beren. Basically, I wasn't sure we'd end up with time for that because we'd be rushed. But I think actually we should be okay. We should be okay. But you know what this really does emphasize, though? This really does emphasize how focused on Beren and Luthien it's going to become. Like, once we really get into their story, we need to do a lot of that extra work that we wanted to do in those first couple episodes while we're still willing to bounce around. Once we come out of our bottle episode in episode 4, we're gonna want to stick pretty close to Beren and Luthien. I mean, there's some other things that we can show, but we're definitely going to want to have that focused in pretty clearly, I think, by that point. So, okay. And yes, Alana, we're totally having a frame story. We're just postponing thinking about it as yet. So, or we're working on that. I mean, that is no, we're postponing working on that is more precisely what is happening. But yeah, I think that this shape will work. You know, I have some odd, and again, I'm totally ready to, you know, like, people, I'm totally open to other objections or thoughts about the end of the season. Like if people don't want to have a whole episode, post Mandos, I kind of do, but I don't have a really clear vision in my mind for those final episodes. It just seems to me important that we don't, what we can't do, I think, is we can't risk having her singing before Mandos in episode 13, them returning to life, healing Thingol, roll credits on the season. Because then it, like, it's too open-ended, right? It looks where they are and what it means and what's going on, right? Like Melian's reaction when they come back. Remember where the story of Luthien ends, right? The story of Luthien ends with like, and they have lost her whom they most loved, right? And I think that's the, you know, one of the notes that we need to strike really hard, and we're not going to get that. If the eucatastrophe of their return from death is the big thing, and then we close credits, it looks like new beginnings, right? But it's not exactly new beginnings. It's going to need to be handled really carefully. And frankly, I think that it would be cowardly of us to minimize the post-Mandos sequence. And I say cowardly because it's going to be super hard to do. It's going to be really hard to not have the end of this season feel really weird, because it is weird. And we need to like figure out how to handle the weirdness and show, because things tie together at the end of this story. Our themes are going to be resolved, but not in the expected way. Not in any kind of a normal or typical plot resolution way. And so, you know, that we need to do some work on that. But anyway, yeah. Yeah, so, all right, there's my pitch about why we spend all of episode 13. You know, we have them returning. Or like we have her, you know, singing before Mandos, and like, you know, Mandos's decision, or like the tension anticipating Mandos's decision or something, or Mandos puts the choice to Luthien or something. And then episode 13 is the consequences, you know, the consequences of what she did and what they chose. Right. So anyway, lots of fun things. So I think we kind of did it. Yep. I think this works great. Baron's fleeing Dorthonion, fighting spiders, and crossing the girdle of Melian is an eminently interruptible plotline, right? Like we can easily splice in other things as we're continuing to round out the early stories there. You know, meanwhile, Baron, we return to Baron to find him in a worse position, fighting even more horrible things than he was fighting before. Is, you know, that's an easy sequence to maintain for a while. And then ending with a girdle of Melian. Okay. Yep. I think this is great. I think that this is, you guys can definitely start with this, and then we'll continue to think through Baron and Luthien. We need to talk more about Angband, of course. We need to make sure that we're all on the same page about the fall of the tower and the fights with Huon and Sauron, the conflict with Sauron. I want to talk about like how exactly is that going to go down. We've talked about that some. I want to kind of resolve that. I want to think about, like I said, I want to think about Angband and how we handle Angband in Morgoth. And of course, we do need to get to more discussion of Mandos and that 13th episode as well. Think of where we're headed there. And if we have leftover time, we can talk about Dairon. We'll see. I feel like I've been continuing to avoid the Thingol thing, but I actually think... Oh, wait. We also have to talk about the treehouse next time, too. I have treehouse issues that I need help with. I need someone to help me with my treehouse issues, because locked in the treehouse is like a totally legit fairy tale trope, but I have a hard time seeing how it translates. It's good. I think it's like low key a kind of big adaptation challenge, actually, because I think there are some things that are kind of weird about the locked in the treehouse part, and the Rapunzel bit and everything else, right? So we can... I want to talk about the treehouse. I need help with the treehouse. So anyway, we'll talk about that too next time. All right, and next time will be March 24th, right? So that will be we continue to be like, it's kind of impressive how all of our sessions have just been like dodging every conflict that I have so far, which has been very convenient. So we should be okay for March 24th. So that's great. March 24th at 10. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Marie and Dave, for your help here tonight. Glad to see, Nick has been in the chat. I know Nick couldn't be with us here tonight, but glad that Nick was around anyway. And thanks to everybody else who was also commenting and helping us here as we were going through. And we will see folks next time. So as I will say, as always, thanks for listening and Godspeed.